The Russia-Ukraine war has been grinding on now for getting close to 1,300 days. It's been going on for 3.5 years. The carnage there is catastrophic. Just this week, it's been reported that Russia has recently hit the 1 million mark for casualties. About 250,000 of those are deaths. So 250,000 Russians dead, and hundreds of thousands of others maimed and mutilated. CNN says this: no Soviet or Russian war since World War II has even come close to Ukraine in terms of fatality rate. It also said Ukraine has sustained nearly 400,000 casualties, with between 60,000 and 100,000 deaths. Now, in light of all this, President Trump is pursuing and pressing hard for peace right now. He met with Vladimir Putin in Russia, and as all the world looked on. He met with the leaders of the European Union nations at the White House, including Ukrainian President Zelensky. And he's preparing right now a potential meeting between Putin and Zelensky, and plans are currently underway for a meeting possibly in the city of Budapest in Hungary. Now, as Russia dominates global headlines, I believe the current climate in Russia is paving the way for the Gog-Magog invasion on several fronts. Let me mention 3 of these. First, Russia is obsessed, and has been for decades, with retrieving and recreating its Soviet past. Its days of former greatness. And that desire seems to be increasing. Vladimir Putin, a former KGB agent, has a thirst for former Soviet glory, and so do his subordinates. Politico has an article that says Sergei Lavrov's Alaska outfit hints at Soviet nostalgia. The headline says that they're wanting this nostalgia, from the past of the Soviet Empire. Now, Sergei Lavrov is Russia's foreign minister, and he was part of the delegation that accompanied Vladimir Putin at the Alaska summit with President Trump. Here's what that Politico article says. It says Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov appeared to be wearing a sweater with the letters CCP, Russian for USSR, upon his arrival in Alaska. The current Russian regime has repeatedly exploited USSR nostalgia to pursue its political and imperial goals, according to experts, with Putin calling the breakup of the Soviet Union the greatest political catastrophe of the 20th century. He said that actually 20 years ago, back in 2005, during an address. He said that the breakup of the Soviet Union was the greatest political catastrophe of the 20th century. He's wanting to recreate and reconstitute that Soviet empire. The article goes on and says Moscow's longing for the past has been frequently linked to its full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022 and the ensuing war. So a lot of this that's happening in Ukraine is this desire to gain the glory of the Soviet empire. Now, to me, it's easy to see how Putin could be drawn into an invasion of Israel with Iran and Turkey and other nations if he believes that can help him achieve his ultimate goal of recreating the lost Soviet empire. If he believes that's a piece or a part to that, he would gladly be part of something like that. And this could even be possibly the hooks in the jaws that are mentioned in Ezekiel 38, verse 4. It talks about how God's going to put hooks into the leader of this invasion, into his jaws, and pull Russia into this invasion in Israel. It says in Ezekiel 38, 4, God speaking of the leader of this invasion named Gog, I will turn you around, put hooks in your jaws, and bring you out with your whole army. And it's very conceivable to me that Russia's lust for its former glory could serve as the motivation behind Russia's involvement in this invasion. It could be something that pulls them in. Now, secondly, we see the division between Europe and Russia that's growing. The alignment of East versus West that I think is present in the end times is forming before our eyes. The leaders of the EU right now are pressuring Russia. They're squaring off with Russia. The EU leaders all came to the White House and are united against Russian aggression in Ukraine. And the Bible predicts that in the end times, the Antichrist, the leader of a reunited Roman Empire, will broker a peace deal with Israel. So he's going to rise from a reunited Roman Empire that is, centered primarily in Europe. And the EU, I think, could be the embryonic phase of this final empire. But after that peace is established between the Antichrist and Israel, the Bible says that Russia and its allies, again, Iran and Turkey and some other Islamic nations, are going to attack Israel. So think about this. If the Antichrist has this peace covenant or treaty with Israel in place, an attack on Israel will also be an attack against the Antichrist and his coalition. So the battle between East and West seems to be building and forming before our eyes. This week I ran across a fascinating article online. I'll probably refer to this in the future some more when I kind of have time to crystallize my thinking on this a little bit better. But it's an article online from Northeastern University. Here's what it says, that there's a long-running idea in mystical Russian theology. This is the Russian Orthodox Church, that Russia is holding back the Antichrist and is doing that specifically through the prayers of the departed Tsar Nicholas II, who was canonized by the Russian Orthodox Church. They believe Tsar Nicholas II is in heaven interceding on behalf of them, and through his intercessions, Russia is successful in holding back the Antichrist. So they believe this war against Ukraine is a holy war. And the Russian Orthodox Church is supporting this. Now, we know from the Bible that the Antichrist will rise from Europe, again, a reunified, revived, reconstituted Roman Empire. The Antichrist is not the same as Gog, who's the leader of this Russian coalition in Ezekiel chapter 38. They're not the same person. In fact, they're adversaries. They're on different sides. And Russia could view its future war against Israel as a holy war to hold back the Antichrist, just like they think this war against Ukraine, they think it's doing the very same thing. So that's a fascinating kind of angle to this whole Gog-Magog invasion, I believe. A third way that current events in Russia foreshadow what's coming is that Vladimir Putin bears all the evil characteristics of this final Russian ruler named Gog. In Ezekiel 38, 1-6, 10 proper names identify the invading forces that will come against Israel in the end times. 9 of those describe geographical locations. But the word Gog is the lone exception. I mean, it occurs 12 times, the word Gog, in chapters 38 and 39. And this is the name or title for the leader of this invasion. He's identified as Gog of the land of Magog, the prince of Rosh, Meshech, and Tubal, in Ezekiel chapter 38, verse 2. And we know that Gog is an individual because he's addressed directly by God in verse 14 of chapter 38. Also in chapter 39, verse 1. Also in chapter 38, verse 2, chapter 39, verse 1, he's called a prince. And thirdly, he's referred to repeatedly by the use of personal pronouns. So we know that Gog is not a nation or a place. Gog is a person. And it also says he's of the land of Magog, indicating that he's a person. The word Gog is not probably this leader's name. I don't think his name will literally be Gog, but it's like a title it could be, or just a description of what he'll be like. In the Old Testament, the word Gog appears only one time outside of Ezekiel 38 and 39. It's in 1 Chronicles chapter 5 and verse 4, and clearly references a different person there. But Gog, the word Gog may mean high or supreme or a height, possibly emphasizing this leader's elevated position or pride. And it may come, though, from a word meaning darkness. Ezekiel refers to this unnamed future enemy of Israel as a dark figure, someone that's unknown and evil. He calls him dark. And when you think about it, that is a perfect description of Vladimir Putin. The darkness, we see it increasing all the time as more and more of his evil, I think, is revealed, which raises the question, could he be this Russian leader known as Gog? Now, while that's very possible, I think we always need to avoid the temptation to conclusively identify some world leader today as some end-time figure. I know I've read this quote before, but I'm going to repeat it again. Some of you may not have heard this when I've read it before, but it's a quote by Joel Rosenberg. He's an author and a journalist. He gives his assessment about the connection between Putin and Gog. He says, over the years, people have asked me if Putin might be the Russian dictator referred to as Gog in the biblical prophecies of Gog and Magog in Ezekiel 38 and 39. Here's my quick answer. It's too soon to draw such a conclusion. There's much more that would have to happen to indicate that Putin was the Gog of Bible prophecy. But there's no question in my mind that Putin is Gog-esque. I like that he's Gog-like. He's dangerous, and both Israel and the West should keep a close and wary eye on him, especially given all that Putin has done to build a strategic alliance between Russia and Iran and the other countries mentioned in the Gog and Magog prophecies.